Welcome to MOTS, where we'll be applying the Manzer or Mosi-Thurlow scale of quantitative analysis of pop culture narrative through a binary system.
Or MOTS! This podcast contains spoilers, mature content, and language. Viewer discretion advised.
Hi, welcome back to MOTS. Today we are reviewing Doctor Strange, the newest in the Marvel movies series, which seems endless now. I'm Jonathan Ian Manser, here with Rich Perry.
How you doing?
And Chris Morgan.
Hey, good evening.
Our usual regulars, Scott and Steve-O, are off celebrating Steve-O's birthday in AC. So leave a comment if you actually listen to these in YouTube.
Yeah.
To wish him a happy birthday.
Yeah, probably, as we'll probably get into later in the movie. Steve-O's taking anybody wishes him a happy birthday, keeping him at 34, not, yes, his age, and not aging anymore. So he says, anybody doesn't wish me a happy birthday, me aging is on you. So, yeah, so write a comment, you know, if you're listening, say happy birthday, Steve-O. Or go to hell, Steve-O. It's all the same to him.
Yeah, it's
I think he could drive his age-defying magic from that.
So I'm going to start. I'm going to start with the regular funny log line that we do, which is Sherlock Holmes goes to Hogwarts. Which
it's an apt log line.
Yes, very fitting for Benedict Cumberbatch's portrayal of Stephen Strange. But we'll move on to Rich. Would you like to give us the actual synopsis?
Yeah, sure. So Stephen Strange is a very talented surgeon who gets into a car crash and ruins his hands.
Yes, on the high cliffs of New Jersey.
Yeah, cliffs I've never driven down before in my entire life here. But he exhausts all of his options to trying experimental surgery, goes to, was it Nepal?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, goes to Nepal, meets the Ancient One, who, instead of fixing his hands, tells him about this magical reality, or these multitude of universes that he's never heard of, and how she's going to teach him magic to help defend the world from it. And during his training, he eventually overcomes his hubris and his arrogance and starts to become a true hero.
I guess.
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah. All right, then I'll go into the intro in more in depth now. All right, as Rich just put, the movie starts off with him as this arrogant brain surgeon who the movie does a good job of both portraying him as brilliant in his craft while also being a smug D-bag.
There's also some compassion in there too.
Yes, it's a complex character for as complex a character as an origin film can really deliver. Because, actually, I'll preface this with, so I was thinking about how I should view this film as I was watching it, which I guess speaks more to the film wasn't as engrossing as it may have been as I was analyzing. But you're both dealing with an origin story which has to follow the hero's journey. And also, you're dealing with a movie, yes, established in a set universe, but is adding an element to the universe which they have to introduce you to. And you're already in a Marvel universe with superheroes and villains and Guardians of the Galaxies, you know, but they still have to deal with the suspension of disbelief that comes with adding magical elements to it. And so there's actually a lot of weight that this movie carries, and because it has to both build a set of whole new characters that you're not familiar with, while also building a whole set of new rules to a universe that it has already been established. So there's not a lot of time to fit in with character development, and the intros actually felt, I wouldn't say rushed, but it went by very fast. And it was filled to the brim with overemphasizing certain aspects of Stephen Strange in order to make the point very quickly. So he seems like he is more of a D-bag than Tony Stark was in Iron Man 1, because they wanted to establish his arrogance very quickly. He treats people like, even in his lowest point when he gets into the car crash and his hands are broken and his lights ruined, he's spending all of his money to fix this, and he's treating everyone who's attempting to comfort him, he pushes away, including this character, Christine Palmer, who is a former lover of his that still cares about him. And again, it has to overemphasize a lot of these points in order to get through with it quickly. And I thought it did a fair job at it, although for all the technical wonders of this movie, the car crash seemed a little bit both CGI and, my God, how did he not just kill every bone in his body? So
it's like seeing his hands get crushed in slow motion too. Just looked kind of weird. So like the car was just like, well, we need to take out your hands sometime.
Well, I'm seeing here, like I said before, because he crossed a bridge. So I assumed he was either going to one of three places: New Jersey, Connecticut, or, upstate New York. But I figured if he was upstate New York, they wouldn't have those rocky cliffs. Number one.
The Palisades.
The Palisades?
Yes. That's why I assume that's where it happened. I'm not.
It didn't look anything like, Route 1 in California or anything like that. No, 101. Is it 101? I can't remember. It's the Pacific coastline.
But he's in New York, isn't he?
But that's what I'm saying. That's why I was joking about it, because it looks like they shot the car going down, because all of a sudden when he crashes, like he's going through this windy, cliff road, and there's like rocky cliffs above him and below him. And then like his crash, all of a sudden he's in like an urban industrial area. It's just like, and then like when his car goes in, you could see a bridge behind him. And I'm like, they're not even pretending this is upstate New York, because it's definitely not the Tappan Zee Bridge, so I'm like sitting here going, you know what? I don't care. I'm going to give this a pass. But it's like, it didn't affect the movie for me, but like it didn't take me out of the movie in such a way that I'm like, oh my God, I can't focus on this. Yeah. I just had a good time in my head, like saying, okay, I'm going with you on this.
There's one last point I would like to make, which is the introduction of a character who I would otherwise leave out, except it kind of bookends, Stephen Strange's introduction and kind of the conflicts that will come. There's a character who had some kind of misfortune. I forget what exactly it was, but he
broke his back and had no use of his legs and
he had his arms. Severed his like C6 and C7.
Yeah.
Oh, you remember that quite more than I do. But anyway, he went to Nepal and found a mystical solution to his problems, and now he uses his magic to walk. Mm-hmm. And he'll come. The only reason he's the lead that sends Stephen Strange onto Nepal. However, he does come back in an important character for another character's development later.
Yeah. What I found interesting about that is because he recognizes Stephen Strange as the doctor that turned him down when he went to him for surgery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he still chooses to give him the information to go to Nepal. Instead of just being like, sorry, buddy.
Well, that's the thing is he's actually a good person. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The guy, he's played by Benjamin Bratt. That's all I remember. But yeah, you had made a comparison to, Iron Man, the intro to Iron Man. And I immediately thought, because of Nepal, obviously, but for various reasons, Batman Begins. But
that's it. I think that begins the body.
Yeah, there. but no, but when I'm getting to your point, because you were saying that you felt that the intro part was a little rushed. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to say it's probably more than Batman Begins, but less than Iron Man. Because Iron Man, that was the first entire half of the movie where I'd say like this, the intro for this is, not quite as long.
Yeah. Well, also Iron Man did a brilliant move by splitting up the current action with so you saw Tony Stark in his when initially in his current state of being captured in the Afghanistan, and then it would cut to him actually in the real world prior to that. So you get to see both concurrent storylines. Actually, Deadpool did that quite a bit as well. Mm-hmm. This one, they give you a very, very rough cut, and then let's move on to the plot.
Well, the thing is, first of all, that trope, is so overused but if it's done well, like it was in Iron Man, you don't notice it. Mm-hmm. But they wouldn't work in this one only because there's so much other stuff we're going to get to that you have to put into perspective. trying to be clever with the editing wouldn't work.
So any other thoughts?
No.
I enjoyed it. Like, it gave me a good intro to who Strange was going to be for the rest of the movie.
I loved it. I thought it was great. I liked the little touches because the one thing I was saying about Compassion was when you remove the bullet and she's just like, I got to get this thing. He's like, he doesn't have time. And then he's doing it. So there's a bit of arrogance. Like, I can do this, but that's where I got the compassion from, is because like he doesn't have time. He went out and saved this guy and it wasn't all motivated by ego. And
maybe like 90% of it.
I'd say a little less than that. I'd say probably maybe 75, 60. Yeah. But, the one thing that got me though, and I'm going to say this right now because I said no really loud in the theater, was the first note of that Chuck Mangione song. Cause I grew up in the 70s and that song was all over the place. And it's one of those things that once you get it, it's stuck in your head. And it's just like,
it starts again.
And so I'm like, oh God, please. I'm like, no, like in the movie theater. And I'm like sitting here going, okay, he guessed it. I'm like, okay, please move to the next song. And he's just like, no, they had the tech that was, playing, guess which song this is?
Billy the Nurse?
Billy the Nurse. He's just like 1978. He's like, no, it's 77. Check it out. I'm like, oh my God, they're still discussing the songs on. And then he starts singing to it. And I'm like, is it Feeling Good? I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah.
Good Feelings or something like that. And I'm like, oh my God, it's like torture. Like they're sitting there like, it's like the Pina Colada song in Guardians. I'm like, why did they do this? Why did they do this to us?
This reminds me more of your conversation about ABBA and The Martian.
That I like. ABBA's definitely a guilty pleasure of mine because they're great, but.
All right.
But that's for another cast.
What are you guys giving this for a score?
I'm giving it a 1.
I'm definitely giving it a 1.
So
here we go.
It's not the fault of the introduction, but it's the fault of the narrative at large, which will come later, because there are elements of I feel compelled, which I'll get to in the body, to give one of these a 0, but I'm going to sacrifice the intro for that 0. But I'll explain why. It's fine. This is a competently done movie, narrative wise, but I'll explain later. But I need to give something a 0, so I'm going to give this a very, very soft 0.
Sacrificing the intro.
Yeah.
All right.
So,
very good.
So, Rich, onto you for the body.
All right. So we pick up where Doctor Strange makes it to Nepal after having sold all of his possessions and buying a one-way ticket and keeping the only thing he kept is a watch that Christine had given him. So he's followed by Mordo and gets mugged by these random street punks. Mordo saves him. He takes him to go meet the Ancient One, and he's just an arrogant asshole to her the entire time. To the point where after she shows him existence of magic by knocking him through all these different realities, he comes back, begs her to teach him. She simply says no and throws him out on his ass. So after 5 hours of begging, they finally let him in and he begins his training. And what I liked about this is that throughout his training, he was never shown to be like particularly more skilled than anyone else. Like maybe, with certain ways that he uses magic, you got to see how creative he was. Like, to get around the fact that his body needs sleep and he wants to study, he'll study in his astral form.
No, that was a really neat scene.
Yeah, that was excellent.
And use portals to steal books from the library that he's not supposed to have access to. Eventually, Caecilius shows up and destroys the London Sanctum, right?
Well, first, I forgot to mention this in the introduction.
Yeah.
He steals a page from a mysterious tomb so he can contact this mysterious figure in the dark world, and then he goes and destroys the London Sanctum.
Yeah, the London Sanctum, after he had contacted this entity and absorbed his powers. So Strange had found the Eye of Agamotto, started testing out his time capabilities by turning an eaten apple into an uneaten apple and vice versa.
That was awesome.
Taking the page with the book with the missing pages and reversing it so the pages now exist. He reads a little bit about this dark entity, calls out the Ancient One, believing, as you find out correctly, that she's been tapping into the dark energy from this entity. He gets cut off by Caecilius, or the London Sanctum being blown up. They get chased to New York, where he comes into contact with the Cloak of Levitation, ends up mortally wounded, goes to the hospital to see Christine. She operates on him. He's able to fight his way out. He traps Caecilius, who then escapes. And then then Mordo and the Ancient One show up to kind of give him a pep talk. And he decides to stay and fight. So they track down... No, Caecilius attacks again. They end up in the mirror dimension, where the Ancient One eventually comes and saves them, only to be stabbed and thrown through a portal to her death. Well, not immediate death.
Well, she actually chooses it because she's just like, I've seen my whole life that I've never seen past this point.
Yeah.
And the other thing I like was when Mordo and when Doctor Strange moved them to the mirror universe, and Mordo's like, yeah, it won't harm the real world, but he can actually kill us now. Like, it made him stronger.
Yeah, because he has more, because sorcerers have more control over the mirror dimension.
So I just want to say, you said she chooses her death because she hasn't seen beyond that. Does she?
I don't think so.
No, I didn't say she chooses her death. She just allows it to happen. In other words,
yeah, but what's
it's semantics, but it's like the level of intent. Let's put it that way.
I don't think she chooses to accept it until she's meeting with Strange in the astral plane.
Well, I like where she's just like, I'm holding this for like just a few more minutes just to watch the snow, and then she disappears. Yeah. That's great.
So, there's one point you brought up earlier where he's a jerk to the Ancient One. And I like, because there's a big thing about Tilda Swinton being the Ancient One. Like, oh, it should be some old Asian guy. They actually had an old Asian guy there who was one of the, he assumes that that's the Ancient One, and then Tilda Swinton appears and
serves some tea.
Yes. So I liked that kind of reversal.
Yeah.
Initially.
They gave her a background too, that she's Celtic.
Yeah.
Which worked very well for explaining her role in the whole mystical arts. But I couldn't help I couldn't help feeling that if you ever played any RPGs and set in a fantasy world where you join a mages guild and you do quests, that I'm not sure how much time passed in this entire they kind of reference months past.
The training montage.
Yeah, but it sort of felt that in game I've spent 5 days in this mages guild and already I'm Archmagister of it or something like that. And it felt that Stephen Schreider's you're rising pretty quickly in this ancient order of wizards that have existed for centuries.
I like how they do mention that. And it's like, oh, I have a photographic memory. And yeah, that doesn't really explain it. You kind of take to the mystic arts faster than many we've seen.
Because of plot in a way. And again, this is it's a very competently done film. And that's why I had to, I don't have really real criticisms against it except that they're doing stuff I've seen already, whether you're doing Iron Man 1, whether you're doing Batman Begins, whether you're doing a random fantasy RPG. It just felt like this is a really well done version of stuff I've seen already. And that's but the battles that they have in this, when they're fighting in this more goes to style, but when they're fighting, Caecilius, and in the mirror world and creating this clockwork city, which they're fighting over. And there's this one scene where he's fighting in the New York Sanctum, where they introduce this, all these portals. Doors to other, segments of the world.
Yeah.
And by flipping a switch, you flip where the door leads. So he would throw one enemy through and then fight while you see the enemy running through this desert back towards the portal, and he's fighting the other enemy, attempting to get to the switch to flip the thing, and he does at the end. But like it's a lot of very clever uses of mystical powers that I haven't seen before in other works.
Yeah.
I agree.
So any other thoughts on the body?
No, because everything I want to say is like, I could bring this up later on when we do character. I got to bring this up when we do conclusion. So,
True. So what are you guys giving the body?
I give it a 1. I mean, it had some heavy lifting to do with like explaining the rules of magic.
And they did what I joked before when I said the montage, but it was one of those things where it is like Batman Begins. It is like, Captain America. It is like, Iron Man, where it's just like, they do the montage as well. It's not like, you're the best. It's,
what makes it great is that I think what makes a good montage is that it'll have those moments and then it'll have like the quiet scene.
It's the fluidity of it. Instead of it being choppy editing, it was very fluid.
And what I actually really appreciate that I think that this movie is the real strength of this movie is it explains the rules of its universe very well by having establishing moments for how everything works. So in that fight scene I was saying earlier about the portal switching, you see Stephen Strange before the attack happens, like walk up to it and flip the switch. So how it works. With we'll get into the conclusion
without getting bogged down in exposition.
Yeah, with the conclusion which deals heavily with time travel and or in a sense time manipulation. There's that Apple scene, as you mentioned, which, we're going to give you a soft example of how this works so that we can apply it later on and you're not
in a grand scale.
Yeah.
Well, I like the way they did it too, because when he did the thing with the apple, when he first, made it age and then he made it grow, and put it back to the normal. He did that a couple of times just so you kind of like, they didn't do it too many times, but cause even I was the first time like, wait, what's he doing? I'm like, oh wait, all right. I get it. And then, so they do that, and that's a launching off point to when he recreates the page. It was really, they did the establishment really, really, really well.
So I'm going to give it a 1 for the body.
Okay.
And we're on to the conclusion with Chris.
Usually the conclusion for films like this usually drive me nuts. I love the Avengers movie, but like the ending's like, all right. And Avengers 2 is even more, manic. So I'm starting off with the fact that they really could, based on everything you had seen with the folding of the universes and all that stuff, that this really could have been a visual clusterfuck of an ending. So what happens is the Ancient One dies and they realize there's going to be attack on the
Hong Kong Sanctum.
Yeah, the Hong Kong Sanctum. So they take a portal there, but they're too late because, what's the enemy's name? Caecilius.
Hannibal,
yeah. That's right. Is already, they get there and they're too late. And like right before they get there, you see like Wong and everybody like, okay, we're ready to fight. And by the time Strange and Mordo get there, basically a building's fallen on, Wong and all those guys, and the building explode, starting to explode.
But more so than that, the Dark World or whatever starts appearing over
but that's
the skies of Hong Kong.
But that's it. It's just like the Dark World appears and it tears down the building. And, Mordo's like, we lost this thing. And then Strange remembers about him turning back time. So he turns back time and basically traps, Caecilius in a wall and everybody kind of in like a fish tank and everything to kind of.
That was an incredible fight scene.
Seriously. But like, I think you brought up before the podcast was, they set it up so you're ready to have this big thing. You're about to see they're going to level Tokyo, and all of a sudden they stop and then they put it in reverse. So it completely like you said before, it completely subverts that expectation, which I thought was amazing.
What I found incredible about this fight scene too is when he first starts putting things back in time, he chooses to bring Mordo into like his perception of time, and then you see Caecilius and his followers use the power of the Dormammu to bring themselves into that perception of time. So they're all moving regularly while everyone and everything is moving past them.
Yeah.
And it just has to be seen to.
Yeah, it is the most impressive. And like Thor 2, actually, I feel had up until this movie had the most impressive final battle with its fight through the portals, which again, Thor 2 was a mediocre movie with a great ending. This is a competent movie with a ending I have not ever seen before. Like, the reversal of time it's one thing to dodge a car. It's another thing to dodge a car crashing in reverse.
Yeah.
It's such a...
And like you see the body just fly back through the windshield as it puts itself back together and then drives off.
Well, it's funny because once the villains kind of like broke the time spell, Mordo's like, we're done. And he goes, no, we're not. And Strange flies into the dark world and draws out the villain. And he's like, I'm going to destroy you. And he kills Strange. Strange comes back, cause Strange comes up and he goes, all right, I'm here to negotiate. And he kills him. And then he comes back. He's like, I'm here to negotiate. It's like Strange made a time loop. And he's basically like, yeah, here's the negotiation. We do this for all eternity. Or, you take your three, you take your, 3 zealots and, back to your world and you go away and you leave this world alone. And it was just like an amazing thing. It's just like this time loop. And they, like I said, they did it enough, but, to get to the point and, but right when it was about to be too much, it's just, that's when they stopped it. And
Dormammu gets bored around the time that you start getting bored.
Yes.
But for all intents and purposes, it was probably a lot longer than that for them because he's a timeless entity.
Yeah. Well, they made a really good thing where like they just stopped him. They just stopped the part where he says negotiating and they just kept showing him where he gets killed over and over again and then hopping down. And so it was like they kind of sped up the editing and the cuts. So yeah, that works. And, everybody and all the, zealots go up into the, dark world or whatever. And, then then Mordo's just like, you broke the laws, all the stuff that, basically Mordo's faith was broken because the Ancient One wasn't who he thought she was. And now Strange was following in her footsteps. Like they were doing things they shouldn't. So he walks away and then Strange goes back to New York to talk to Christine. And he, after she has seen all this stuff, is just like, I've got to go back, but I want you to come with me. And she doesn't say anything. She just smiles, gives him a kiss on the cheek and walks away. It was beautiful, beautifully well done, beautifully done. And, then the movie kind of ends. And, did I miss anything before I get to the, after credit scenes?
Oh, we'll discuss those in a moment. There's a couple of points I want to make about the conclusion. I like the fact that he did not become Sorcerer Supreme.
Yes,
in this movie.
Yeah, Wong did make it a point to say that the position was still open.
Yeah. So to all the points I was making earlier about how it felt like an RPG type thing, he progressed in the society, but he's still just a master. He's not yet in control of everything. And even after having stopped the world from being devoured, but it kind of makes it feel like this happens kind of regularly, and most people aren't aware of it because of magic.
Yeah.
So
that was probably how he got his master's title by facing Dormammu.
The other thing is when he first gets the amulet, when he gets the book and he gets the amulet, it twists and like this green glow comes out and I'm like, that's one of the Infinity Stones. I immediately thought that. So at the end, he's there with Wong and Wong's getting him to put the amulet back where it belongs. And I can't remember what he said, but
you don't want to use an Infinity Stone for too long.
Yeah, you don't want to use an Infinity Stone for too long. It's like, ha.
I'm interested to see now the Infinity War with Thanos using all Infinity Stones.
Yeah.
Because they've set a really, 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 really high bar.
Yeah.
Well, and then they also have to work in Doctor Strange, the Guardians of the Galaxy. They have to work in every Avenger. They were talking like these are going to be the most expensive films ever made. I think either together they're clocking it over $1 billion, and that's probably just, Robert Downey Jr.'s salary alone.
Yeah.
That's why they're going to kill him off in the most spectacular fashion.
They're going to kill off Iron Man the first 30 seconds.
But, again, this was one of the cleverest endings again, for such a conventional movie, there were plenty of not thematic, like stylistic choices that were so clever in this. And the conclusion is, if there's one reason to see this movie, it's for the conclusion, actually, the final fight scene. But anyway,
isn't this like this has to be the first time that a Marvel hero or a hero that I've remembered in recent memory that's defeated the villain like with his wits instead of just like, because he goes in, he knows he can't win, and he just tricks him into a one-sided bargain.
Yeah, it was like a very Doctor Who thing to do. Too.
Yeah.
Or a very Sherlock thing to do.
Or a very Sherlock thing to do, indeed.
Oh, the after credit scenes.
Yeah. Yeah, so the first after credit scene was him talking, well, Wesley, if he goes, "Oh, so you're telling me that there's wizards in the world now?" You're like, "Wait, that voice sounds familiar." And he goes, and they open it up, and it's, you only see Benedict Cumberbatch, you only see Strange, and he's like, "So you're a god, want some tea or something?" And he panned over, and it's Thor with one of those huge mugs of beer, like the kind you get like when you graduate college or something.
That he drinks.
Yeah, it's like a 48-ounce mug of beer. And he's like, "Nope." And he, they pan away from him to Strange, and he comes back and the glass is almost empty, and
Strange starts refilling.
Yeah.
Magic.
He's like, "Okay, so what are you here?" He's like, "You lost your father, and, you're bringing your, brother down in New York for what reason?" "Looking for your father." And he's like, "Uh-huh." And then Strange is like, "Okay, I'll help you."
Yeah. It's like, if you find your father, will you leave promptly? And he's like, "Yes, promptly."
That's right. I forgot about that.
So then he's like, "All right, I'll help you out."
And then the last one, and I really appreciate this too, is after the major credits, they come back to Mordo, and he comes by, he goes and talks to Benjamin Bratt, and he's just like, "I've changed my perspective on the universe, whatever." And he goes, "It's not what we thought it was." And everything that this guy did to help himself, Mordo takes his energy and makes him collapse on the ground. And it's really great because it wasn't setting up like the Guardians 2 or the Infinity War or anything like that. It was setting up Doctor Strange 2. And then when it ended, it said Doctor Strange will return, as opposed to after Civil War, it was like Spider-Man will return.
It also bookended a character in this movie.
Yeah.
So, although I would like to see someone do like an online video of Baron Mordo going to Harry Potter and just training him. Anyway, so what's everyone giving the scores?
I'm giving it a 1.
Absolutely.
All right.
So on to themes with me. So I actually this is Marvel Phase 3. And if you take into account Civil War, I think was the opening of Phase 3.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
They're really playing upon the sacrifices that people have to make to be heroes. But this was far more personal, even though they intended Civil War to be a very personal film. It was kind of bogged down by its ensemble cast. Doc Strange he had to give up everything. And some of it was forced. Like, he had to give up his ego. He had to give up his being a famed neurosurgeon, which he could have taken at any time to go back to that life. And in the end, although Christine kind of didn't let him go in a way so that he could pursue this like lonely role of being the defender of against unimaginable horrors.
Is either you can heal yourself or you can, help out the world. And what I loved, it was like an amazing thing, is when he killed somebody, he started freaking out. He's like, "I took an oath not to, to do no harm, and I just killed somebody."
Yeah.
And then, who was it? Threw his ego back in his face. And this is like, you're really.
The ancient one.
The ancient one. It's
just like you became a doctor for your own ego.
Yeah.
But early on in the film, he makes the claim that doing research and, in a sense, becoming a celebrity neurosurgeon would help more people than like attempting to become a personal doctor in a sense. And it like this really ties in throughout the entire thing of what he has to lose in order to become who he was in a sense meant to be. And also going back to the points on it being an origin story, I think it was very effective, if standard, with the kind of hero's journey. And I think it introduced magic into the Marvel universe in a very functional way that it's not like everything is possible. There are very strict rules to how magic works in this environment. And I thought they handled all their business very well while still imparting a overall message that worked.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Any other thoughts?
No, because like everything I was gonna say, I feel would go more into protagonist.
All right. So I'm giving it a 1.
Yeah, 1.
I'm giving it a 1 too.
Also, don't drink and drive. That was a big theme of the. Text and drive.
Well, that's what they even they do.
Yeah.
See at the end credits. It's just like, do not drive while distracted. It's
which I certainly did on my way back. So we're on to the antagonists with Rich.
All right, so we have 2 antagonists, one big bad and one dragon, Caecilius and Dormammu. I thought Caecilius he wasn't one note per se. Like he had a good point. He wanted to spare mortals the pain of death by making them all immortal within the dark dimension. But I think they mentioned there was a prequel comic that like explained like his reasoning behind that. Like he lost his wife, and
I mean you can't take.
Yeah, I was gonna say if it's not
exactly.
in the film, yeah,
exactly. Like none of that was there. Like there was maybe a throwaway line from the Ancient One saying that he lost something, he was trying to get it back, and then he was all of a sudden crazy. But I appreciated the fact that he sowed a lot of dissension within the ranks by pointing out the secret to the Ancient One's immortality and making the heroes lose one of the greatest allies.
yeah.
And eventually becoming another villain.
What I liked when they introduced him, when the Ancient One's battling him in New York and she starts manipulating thing, he looks at her and says, hypocrite, which I thought was really effective because at that time it's just like, yeah, she's using this in a way that makes her a hypocrite. But later on, when you find out she's been using the dark power, I mean, what that line at the beginning was so insightful, and you don't realize until you get to that he just set something up.
See, Caecilius reminded me of the Hand from Daredevil season 2, which was, I just got into the middle of a war that I don't understand particularly what's going on, and I have no investment in many of these characters aside from Stephen Strange, and I don't know, it didn't necessarily work for me because I didn't have enough of either an empathy for the villain or I didn't really care about it. I was inserted into something without having the right backstory.
I felt like if they spent a little bit more time on showing his early days at the at Camartage, I think that would have had at least like, especially when he's when Strange ties him up in that like
The suit, yeah.
torture rack or whatever. And like he takes the mask off. I think that was a perfect time for him to launch into his backstory and like explain like what happened and then break it to him then that the Ancient One's been using dark energy.
What I thought was neat about him, and this is with who's the big bad guy in the
Dormammu.
To me, once they gave the motivation as to what he was doing, I realized like he's a puppet. Like in other words, it's like he's doing his job as an antagonist in creating this rift for the characters. But when you get to the end, I realize, the way when Dormammu kind of gives him what he wants, but not the way he thought it was going to be, you realize that he's kind of more like this sycophantic puppet. Like he was a zealot. He had this ideal.
What's great is like visually as he shrivels away and gets pulled into the portal, he looks like a puppet on the strings.
Yeah.
Like a marionette.
So like I kind of forgave, like, cause one thing that, we were talking about with Furiosa last year, with Fury is they didn't get bogged down in exposition. They lived for the now. And I thought this movie like had so much to lift in, introducing new concepts and all that stuff. And Guardians did that extremely well, but we all know the space opera. Okay. So this is something, beyond the visuals, it was like Inception where you kind of have to explain this concept. And I appreciate the fact that I didn't feel like we needed his backstory because I was kind of like, okay, he's doing what he needs to do. But once you get to Dormammu, I was like, all right, this all of a sudden gelled for me.
Except it didn't for me because Dormammu was like, was not intimidating enough for me to ever feel it was a threat. I was told it was a threat, but it felt like the curtain was drawn back and his Skeletor from the He-Man cartoon was there. Like, he felt cartoonish.
You know what he kind of reminded me of? Parallax from the Green Lantern movie.
I
you didn't see it?
So, no, I didn't.
No, I was going to say, dude, Green Lantern. Oh, I haven't yet to sit through that movie, but oh my God, that movie, that's awful.
Here's the thing is, I could, in a sense, Dormammu kind of felt, I appreciate how he was defeated, but he kind of felt silly to me. And perhaps that was their intent, but it didn't work. At least that's my opinion on it.
Mm.
Which makes Caecilius not work, because I felt like he wasn't, he didn't sell his soul to a wily devil. He sold his soul to a buffoon.
Yeah. But I think, as one of you touched about before, to me it was kind of like, you kind of had this disposable thing going on, with this villain. But what it did do is it built the world, and it built Mordo as the new villain.
That's true. Like
as a mechanic alone. I mean, I happen to like him probably better than you guys did, but I think as a mechanic alone, he did his job as antagonist.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead again.
Mordo will and I'll get to this during protagonist, actually, because Mordo will definitely get a 1 in the sequel, just off his acting performance in this and the backstory they developed here, because I really think he's an effective villain. However, I don't know if this was enough for me to give it a 1.
So
I don't know. I don't think so either.
I'm going to give it a 1.
I'm going to have to give it a 0.
Okay. And it's on to protagonist with Chris.
All right. Well, it's definitely Doctor Strange. It's definitely Stephen Strange. And I definitely going to say he shares that with Mordo. And I'm going to make a case for the Ancient One. I mean, because maybe she was a protagonist. It's just like they played handoff with the protagonist, and she started it off and then passed it over to Doctor Strange, and then literally at the end passed it off to Doctor Strange. But, Mordo was there the whole time. He was the one that was really, he was taking the journey pretty much for most of the time with Steven. So.
In fact, if you had, you could have had this movie touch all the same points, but just switch the viewpoint of it, because I really feel that Mordo had a central role in this, that they could have been equal. It just happened that the camera was following Stephen Strange more.
Yeah.
All right. So I liked the character of Stephen Strange, although he felt kind of Tony Starkish, or Sherlock Holmes-ish for a lot of it.
I thought like when I first heard the trailer, I'm like, man, he sounds a lot like Dr. House. Hugh Laurie sounded like that when he's like, I never believed in chakras and everything. And he did kind of have a House vibe during this too.
Yeah, I suppose that any character that is a smarmy intellectual have the similar character traits that you can attach it to. But I thought Doctor Strange had a good character arc that was very believable. Although, again, everything kind of felt very fast-paced, because they were trying to both develop new characters and develop an entire new set of rules for this world. But I thought that Mordo's was, in a sense, a more sympathetic character, because you actually saw, Stephen Strange was always kind of new to this, it felt. And he adapted to how rules might fall apart, because he had never bought into any of the rules. He had never been there long enough to
trust you. Plus, he's
invest himself.
Mordo is a true believer.
Yeah,
but no, I think that he needed something to believe in his life, and he found that in the Ancient One, and he found that in his friendship with Stephen Strange, which I actually bought through, even though it felt kind of like, oh, they know each other for 3 days, but it didn't feel like
they did give not a specific, but like we were saying before, they give a fairly decent passage of time.
But again, and then him, in a sense, everything he needed to believe in collapsing in front of him. It feels like someone who lost their faith, and decided to rebel against that. And I think that he was a stronger character than necessarily Stephen Strange was.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I thought of immediately, and this is going to be calling back to a series that Rich, Louis, and I did at the beginning of the year, and the disappointment in Rich's face when he realized that the first 89 Batman sucked, and then when Rich and I went to see Batman versus Superman, this look of disappointment you had. Mordo, there's one point, one of his disappointed expressions reminded me so much of you. I was just like, oh, that's Rich after being disappointed by a Batman movie.
Since he finds out that the Ancient One has been using dark energy.
Oh my God. After all these times, Rich realizes, oh, Burton's Batman kind of sucks.
I do love the fact that, like, between him and Strange, that's why I believe that they shared the role of protagonists, because where Strange had his weaknesses, that's where Mordo's strengths were.
Yeah.
And where Mordo's weaknesses were, that's where Strange's strengths were. And I love the pep talks that they had to give each other in order to get to the final.
Yeah, and that's true, because at the end Strange had to convince Mordo.
Mm-hmm. And that's what makes because they went down the same path, but they ended up taking different, endings to it. And it's what makes Mordo a very tragic figure. A tragic hero in a lot of senses to give him the protagonist role, while Stephen Strange is, again...
It's like the only thing I could think of during the movie, like, as I was watching Mordo go along, it's like, he's going to be a fantastic villain.
Mm.
Yep.
So, I think it's odd that we talked more about Mordo than Stephen Strange, but I think, like, Benedict Cumberbatch played Sherlock Holmes, and I adore Benedict Cumberbatch. I think he's a fantastic actor, but I just think Mordo did had more of a character to play off of. And that might be because Stephen Strange has more baggage that he has to carry coming into this film, with establishing himself as a role to play in the Marvel Universe to come, where Mordo the screenwriters had more freedom to develop him. And I think that it was a very well developed. So I'm going to give it a very strong one.
Yes, same there.
I agree.
Okay, so that's the supporting characters with me, which I'm going to save a couple of them for my fellows here. But I want to say Christine was a great character because she started off as what Natalie Portman was, in a sense, in the Thor movies. But she started off as a very, like, kind of standard female character in a superhero, with a male superhero there. However, at the end, she basically rejected, not in a very harsh way, but in a sense, like, we live two different lives now. I can't be part of your life as a superhero. And with a final kiss, says goodbye, and it's very powerful.
That in the same time, and it goes off of the conversation that they had earlier, where he, like, immediately, like, he pushes her away before he goes off to Nepal. She's like, this is the part where you apologize. And then he says some more to her. She just puts the keys down, walks out of his life. She's like, all right.
But I like the fact when before he asked her to join her, for her to join him, he's just like, I sent you a bunch of emails, and she's kind of like, yeah, what did you want me to say? And she very much was her own person. She wasn't a, like, hanger on, like the damsel in distress, the person who needs,
or waiting for the hero to come
she doesn't need her to validate whatever. And
and I think that what started off kind of as a very kind of weak female portrayal turned out to be a very strong one. So, there are not many supporting characters in this, so I'm going to pass along to Chris.
Okay, I'm going to say that the Ancient One does do double duty, and she is played by Tilda Swinton. And to address one controversy, if Tilda Swinton is playing it, there is no whitewashing. Tilda Swinton can pretty much do anything in my eyes and basically play anyone.
She is a chameleon.
She is an amazing actress, and her character was really interesting. I thought she did have dimension to her, because at one point Mordo's like, when Stephen Strange is banging on the door, he's like, he's been out there for 5 hours, and she's just kind of like, yeah, and then when he doesn't know how to open the portal, the Ancient One brings Strange out on top of Mount Everest, and she's just like, all right, see you later, and leaves. So, like, the only way the only way he can get back is he had to do it himself. And she's like, the way you are, she goes, you'll be frozen in 30 minutes or something.
What was it? So you'll be dead in 15, but you'll probably go unconscious within 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Oh, that's right. And I like the fact when she and Mordo are waiting for him, she's got that fan in her hand and she's just like, futzing with it. And it's like she was and wasn't nervous at the same time. She did a lot with what could have been a very one-dimensional character.
She was a very good teacher too.
Yeah.
Tilda Swinton has a unearthly quality to her. She seems like a being from another, like a fairy or an elf, as they would in like classical depictions of them. And and it really works for almost every portrayal I see her in. Like she had a Puck-like character in this, which ranged from being mischievous to being very serious and dangerous. And I don't know, I have to give her full credit for portraying something that was of the Earth, but outside of it at the same time, which is what was needed for the role of the Ancient One.
Well, I've always been amazed by her because the first movie I saw her in was Orlando, where she spends the first half of the movie as a man and the second half of the movie as a woman. And then she was one of the few things I really loved about Constantine, where she played Gabriel. Mm-hmm. And then, you see her in something like Snowpiercer, where she's kind of like this kind of goofy, pathetic, something that should have been out of a Terry Gilliam movie. Then you see her in, any Jim Jarmusch movie. She's playing some drastic version of herself. And then she ended up in the Amy Schumer movie, Trainwreck. And she was,
really?
Oh my God, she was amazing in that. She does comedy really well. So, the fact that she really gave the Ancient One so much dimension, it just goes to her credit of all the things she's done in her career. And yeah, I'm going to say she's like one of my favorite actors of all time. And, if her and Benedict Cumberbatch actually ever, not that they're going, they have their own lives, but if they ever reproduced, their kid would have like cheekbones that could rip the sky.
All right, Rich, and you want to discuss someone?
Oh yeah, Wong. Like, I love he was a controversial character to bring into this movie because his original portrayal was, and this is like, he was a bit racist. That's a kind of an understatement. Like Asian manservant helping out the white hero. But yeah, they updated him to
Go on, I'm sorry.
A master sorcerer, the most knowledgeable one at Kaimartage because he's a librarian, and like an advisor to not only the Ancient One, but also to Strange, and like his superior in both magic and skill.
And kind of attitude.
Yes.
Oh, he's a sassy one.
Oh, he's very sassy.
My single favorite line that he said was when Strange was trying to make jokes and he wasn't laughing, he goes, "Oh, all my colleagues laugh at my jokes." And he just turns around to him very dryly and goes, "Do they work for you?" It's just like, it's like he wasn't like locked away in this library. He had knowledge of, the outside world and the way things function.
And he was also very threatening when he needed to be. He was just like, "Oh, and if one of these books goes missing, you'll be dead before you leave the compound."
Yeah.
But I thought he was very well done, and I can't wait to see more of him in the next couple films.
And when Strange made that like offhanded joke at the end, and all of a sudden I can't remember which one. What?
Oh, he's because he mentioned to Caecilius that he's getting the immortality he wanted. He's like, but it's not exactly what he thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And he's like, they really should put the warnings before the dark magic spells instead of afterwards. And then Wong just loses it.
Yeah, we were in the theater. It was Beth and I and like, 3 or 4 other people behind us. And when Wong started laughing, I got hysterical.
I love how disturbed Mordo and Strange got when he started laughing. It's like this. I've never heard him make this sound before.
All right, so I'm going to give supporting characters a very strong one. Mm-hmm. Not that there were many of them, but there was not a single character. Oh, actually, before we go, there's just that one doctor that is kind of a pseudo rival to
He's a little bit of a straw man. He barely.
Yeah.
But regardless of that, there's 3 major supporting characters, and they work very well.
Oh, wait, one more prop to Benjamin Bratt's character.
Yes.
He did a lot with a very, very short role.
2 scenes that he had?
He had 2 scenes. One of them was an after credit scene.
Yeah.
So in those 2 scenes, he's probably on screen for like less than like maybe 3 or 4 minutes. But the emotion he conveyed what I loved about his explanation to Strange about where he was, he downplays the entirety of the magic world and what they're fighting against. And then by the end, you get a sense that he trained there for a while before he decided to come back.
So is that ones all around?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So we're on to dialogue with Rich.
This was a drier movie than the Marvel movies usually are. Like there were not a lot of, it wasn't like rapid fire jokes that you're usually used to.
And the only slapstick was the thing with the cloak.
Yeah.
Or the cape, rather.
Do either of you have any favorite lines besides, was it the one that you mentioned at the end?
Yeah, the Wong line. And I like the fact where he's just where he's like, what's your name? He goes, Wong. He goes, is that it? And he goes, what did he say? Is it like
Adele?
Like Adele?
Beyonce?
Like Eminem? He's just like
Drake, Eminem. Come on. You got to know some of these.
It's just, it was, and a lot of it was, again, the way that they set up in the script, because at the one part where he learns the spells from the 2 pages of the book he regenerates, it's like, you didn't know this was a fact. And he goes, God damn, he goes, well, they really should put the warnings before the spells. So he kind of set that joke up in earnest. It was kind of like, it was a dry thing. And then at the end, it's just like, when it's repeated, Wong. It's the only thing that Wong.
I do enjoy how the jokes were like, they were said so passingly.
Yeah.
That like, if you weren't like, a lot of them might have gone over people's heads. Mm. They just like start laughing maybe like a few seconds in, like, oh.
And I like when the Ancient One's sending him, when he first shows up and he's being all, an asshole to her, she puts him through all the, all guiding him through all these different universes and dimensions. And she's very much like, very calm about it, kind of explaining it to him. And then he gets on his knees and he's like, teach me. And she's just like, no. I mean, it's just, it was such a great thing because you get this like kind of like ethereal little exposition and then it like punches you in the face.
I do love how you hear Mordo in the background, like his vitals are going off the charts. Just like, that's right. He looks fine to me. Like brings him back. He looks fine to me and then sends him back on the journey.
So I want to give a shout out to Tilda and the ancient portrayal of the Ancient One in their final moments when in the astral plane, and she's dying in the hospital, and she's like, I've slowed down time, and you're actually seeing lightning slowly crack across the sky in the background, and she's like, I wanted to see like the snow, and it's a very like touching scene because you have 2 great actors like discussing mortality, and which is a theme we've kind of like another theme of this work, which is like, the ever-present threat of death.
Yeah.
And basically a centuries-old being coming to grips with the fact that she's about to die. I thought it was very effective.
I agree.
Still admitting that she was scared.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Again, the acting in this movie all around was really superb. Like, Benjamin Bratt, Tilda Swinton, they all gave so much with just like a glance. It's just amazing.
I think I've enjoyed all of the actors in this one more than any of the other Marvel movies.
I agree.
As a whole.
I agree.
Yeah, aside from, in a sense, the antagonists, in a way, the protagonists and the
which is sad because Mads Mikkelsen is awesome. And like, with what little he had, I think he did as much as he could with it.
But I think that was the fault of the screenwriters more so than the actor. But I have to give the dialogue a pretty solid 1. I think it wasn't even, they did a good job of both creating a world of magic and like flair, but also having that dry sense of humor, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And it felt like an adult Harry Potter film in a lot of ways. So I have to give you credit for that.
I'm definitely giving it 1.
1's all around.
All right, Chris, would you like to talk about style?
Oh boy.
Yeah. Well, the thing that I thought was interesting about the style of this film is so much of the, you get to these kind of films, and the one thing you appreciate about like Ant-Man or Winter Soldier, those endings is they thought about the style. They didn't give you like this clusterfuck of a thing. Like, all due respect, Joss Whedon, I love you, and but like at the end of like one of the Avengers movies where you have these big battles, and it's sometimes like CGI, even the movies that I love, can kind of get a little much. But because I guess the nature of this, is that the CGI was used in such a way that, for lack of a better word, it made sense. I didn't really feel like it was overdone in any way. Even through the cacophony of everything you were seeing, I never felt like it was too much for my brain to handle. I watched the trailer for the Independence Day sequel, The Resurgence, and I'm watching that and I'm like, I already have a fucking headache. There's no way I could see this movie. So for the amount of CGI that this had, and I'd say this probably had more than most of the Marvel films, they really thought about it in a very interesting way. It wasn't like, it was like definitely, it wasn't just like this big battle through dimensions where they could have gotten really crazy with it. They kind of kept it so it all made sense. In other words, so much CGI to me should not have worked, and it worked beautifully. I mean, just speaking to the effects alone.
Yes.
I think I made this point earlier, but I want to reiterate it now, that every single battle scene was clever, played within its own rules, and like, I guess twice they used the mirror worlds, like, reality warping aspect, but then they would introduce another aspect of magic, show you, and like, before the battle happens, they would show you how it works, and then they would apply it to a battle scene. So there's this one where they're fighting where basically Mag Mikkelsen is on the ceiling of this hallway while fighting Doctor Strange, who's on the floor, and while like basically his minions are running along the walls of it, and then they flip the hallway around, so now they're dangling off of a windowsill within the hallway so that they can hold on. It's amazing stuff, and this is really the strength of the movie, is that
the bit where he turns the hallway as he's running down it into an infinite hallway.
Yeah,
yeah,
that he's just like basically running in place.
That was amazing. And go on.
Yeah, but for magic, it's like you can do anything with magic, and they really played off that. So nothing ever felt stale, and as it was going through, there was always something like. They really did imagination's your limit as long as it played within the rules that they've established. And that's a very strong use of magic in a world.
And the other thing I'm going to say, is as much as, Michael Giacchino, again, amazing score. As much as I felt that his score really elevated a movie I loved already, this Star Trek Beyond, this movie, like the music said so much. There's this one point where he's walking around in the New York, what is it called?
Sanctum Sanctorum.
Yeah, the Sanctum Sanctorum. And there's a piano being played over a harpsichord. And then later on that they sped that up, and it was just like a really nice juxtaposition of, two things you really wouldn't normally put together. And here you have this one guy just, of all of science now accepting this thing, and he's walking around in this. It was really, really effective. The score was just really, really effective.
The props department did a very good job of creating all of, like, the magical equipment, even if you didn't get to see what it all did. Mm-hmm. I remember this one, he picks up like this chalice.
Oh, the vase.
Oh,
yeah.
And they're like, Mads Mikkelsen stops as he's like, as he's afraid of it. And he goes, "Oh, you don't know how to use that, do you?" And that shit just hits him with it. But
yeah.
But the fact that they use so many different environments too, which you have New York, you have Nepal, you have Hong Kong, and it all makes a lot of sense to that world. Why it's not like a globe-trotting adventure. With portals, people are switched from one environment to another in an instant, and it works really well.
Yeah, they could have really made you dizzy with that. And it was Ultron that I was thinking of with all the Ultron robots where, like, there were times of it was just like, it was sensory overstimulation. And this one would have been so easy to make, sensory overstimulation with all the portals and all the warping of, visuals and of time and all that stuff.
Right.
And they really paced it well. A lot of it kind of reminded me of what they did with the space opera with, Guardians, where they kind of made what should be mundane interesting. This is what, lesser style would have made something that would give you a headache into something that was, compelling.
Yeah.
So
it helped showing it through the eyes of the protagonist too.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm giving it a 1.
I'm giving it a 1 as well.
1's all around.
In fact, this is probably the strongest element of this work. So recommendations, starting with me. I kind of already gave mine. Yes, if only to see the ending, which is the cleverest battle sequence I've seen in a very long time. And stylistically, watch this either. I didn't get to see this in 3D. I would have liked to have seen this in 3D because I think it would have been great.
Yeah, this is the only thing I told Beth. I said, if we ever see another movie in IMAX 3D, this is the movie we're going to see.
So watch it in the theaters if you can, and if not, get a big screen TV because this is.
Turn off the lights.
Yeah, it's visually amazing, even if the plot is just average to above average.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. It's a phenomenal movie, like all around, every way, shape, and form. And I don't know what else to add to what you just said. It's something that works so well because again, the one thing I have to give credit for with most of the Marvel films is they treat him differently. They treated Ant-Man seriously, but it was more of a comedic movie without ever crossing a line into being silly. And then you had Guardians, which was a space opera, and you had to develop this component to it. And they blend it, and they blend everything well. And with this one, they took a different approach to the movie, and rightfully so, and smartly so. They didn't treat it like another superhero movie. It's just like, okay, we do these movies, each movie to its own, play to its strength and not trying to, pop out a generic formula for all of them.
Yeah.
And considering it's like an origin movie, origin movie has certain things you have to have. You have to have the down and luck, and you've got to have the montage where he first learns his power, and the ending where the protagonist has to use it. But it's, as with everything else, it's like how you do it. Whether it's, you could take something that could be extremely mundane or make it something really special, like it was in Iron Man or Batman Begins, and even Captain America.
Yeah. And the acting was amazing. Visuals were incredible. And what I really very much enjoyed about it is that it wasn't too heavy on the connections to the greater universe. Mm. Like they mentioned the Avengers in passing like once.
Yeah, when you saw the thing of New York, you saw the Avengers building.
Did they also have a thing about Rhodey in there?
I thought so. Like, cause they mentioned the guy in the experimental armor that had like the lower back injury. I think one of the creators like went on record saying that it wasn't a Rhodey reference, but I'm going to choose to believe that it is.
Why would they have that in there if it wasn't a Rhodey reference? But I don't know.
I would love that specifically because I want him to be like Stephen Strange. That's the asshole that didn't go work on my back. And then him and Tony Stark just go at it.
See, that wouldn't be a fun because Stephen Strange would just destroy.
I think Stephen Strange could take on the entire Avengers. First, he threw the Hulk in the mirror dimension.
Well,
and
go on.
No,
Thor.
Yeah, Thor would be a problem.
Yeah, the thing, that was the other thing that I liked about this movie is because when I found out they were going to do Guardians and then when Doctor Strange, I'm like, they're never going to be able to pull this shit off given the universe they've established. And then like when I reread Days of Future Past and they basically go to that version of hell, and I'm like, I really want to see how they do this. And with the success of Guardians, I'm like, all right, now I'm really excited about it. And then it's like, oh, it's Cumberbatch and Swinton and, Chiwetel Ejiofor.
Yes.
When I found that those three were in it, I'm like, sold. And then Benedict Wong, sold.
That's just icing on the cake at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely a 1.
Okay. And our scores were, Ian, you gave it an 8. Rich, you gave it a 9. I gave it a 10, which gives us an aggregate score of 9.
Which is a very fair score, and I think almost what it is on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
So we're right there with everybody else with our opinions of this film.
But, if you make a good film, it's like you make a good film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's well worth a watch. Anyway, I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer, here with Chris Morgan.
Good night and good luck.
And Rich Perry.
Have a good night.
This has been Bon Mots. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Music and editing by Chris Morgan. This has been a Lost Signals production. All rights reserved.